"That's not your name on the deed." Tyler laughed across the table. The roast steamed between us, scent of rosemary masking my rising bile. Ava's bracelets chimed as she reached for the potatoes, eyes avoiding mine. I kept my voice level and said, "Show me what you mean." Tyler flashed his phone, grinning like a kid caught cheating. On the screen, a screenshot showed a line that read, "Owner, Kane, Tyler." My throat tightened, but my hands did not shake. I stood, crossed the room, and took the accordion folder from the hutch. My fingers slid over tabs I'd labeled in blue pen years ago. The original warranty deed lay inside, creased, stubborn, and real under my thumb. I set the deed on the table, beside his glowing phone. Ava glanced down, then away, like the paper burned her eyes. Tyler leaned in close, nostrils flaring as if smelling victory. He tapped the screen, saying, "County records don't lie, Mom." I tapped the inked seal with the notary's raised stamp. My name was there, clear as the day I buried his father. Silence pressed against the windows until the clock ticked too loud. "Pull the county site now," I said, steady as a locked door. He typed fast, swallowed once, then turned the screen toward me. The parcel number matched, yet the listed owner did not. He sat back, smile shrinking, then stretching again like elastic. "It's probably the refinance you forgot, no big deal," he said. My teeth touched, a small click I could feel in my jaw. I had never refinanced, not once in 12 careful years alone. Ava whispered that online databases update slowly, voice sugar over a knife. I noted it, the practiced calm, the gentle explanation that explained nothing. The house smelled of pepper and lemon, but tasted like metal on my tongue. I slid the deed slowly back into its sleeve. Tyler's phone buzzed and flashed a subject line, "Escrow packet final draft." He dragged his thumb across the screen dimming like a guilty eye. "Rita," from next door, knocked once, then peered through the glass, mouthing sorry. I waved her off with a smile I did not feel. Tyler rose to fetch dessert, too eager for a normal ending. I followed him to the counter, passing the fridge covered in school photos. His baby face grinned beside varsity shots, time stacked like plates. He cut slices, hands swift, shoulders tight under his fitted shirt. "You know, I'm just trying to simplify things," he said. I asked what needed simplifying exactly, each word measured. He set a plate down, and the fork rattled harder than it should. Ava called from the table, bright as a commercial, "Bring the caramel, babe." Tyler's laughter echoed down the hallway even after he closed the door. The sound of it crawled along the wallpaper like mildew. I stood by the sink, staring at the reflection in the dark window, face doubled against the glass. My hands smelled of detergent and sweat, the plate under the water forgotten. I remembered when that same boy used to giggle about frogs and fireflies. Back then, his voice had no sharp edges. I dried my hands slowly, pressing each finger as if learning the shape of myself again. The kitchen clock ticked like footsteps in another room. From the dining table, Ava's phone vibrated twice, screen lighting up with a message that read, "Title agent confirmed we're clear." My throat closed around the silence that followed. That night, I sat at the table with the folder open, every document spread like a map of betrayal. The paper edges caught the lamplight, whispering each time I turned a page. Mortgage statement, property tax bill, home insurance, everyone in my name, yet the county website insisted otherwise. I circled the date of the last update, 4 months ago, the same week Tyler borrowed money from me for business taxes. I closed my eyes, replaying the dinner, his casual smirk, Ava's still hands on her lap. She had looked at me not with guilt but with pity. That somehow cut deeper. The next morning I called the county recorder's office pretending to be confused about the listing. The woman on the phone, cheerful and tired, said, "Yes, Mrs. Kane, ownership shows an update under a limited liability company, Kane Holdings." The name was a mockery. I thanked her, voice calm, though my pulse beat through my teeth. Kane Holdings. He hadn't even bothered to disguise it. I brewed coffee and sat on the porch as if nothing had changed. The sky looked ordinary, birds still argued in the maple, yet the air tasted different, like betrayal had a flavor. Rita waved from her yard, holding her pruning shears. "Everything okay, Marge?" she called. I smiled, lied, and said it was just paperwork confusion. That afternoon, Tyler texted me, "Love you, Mom. Dinner again soon?" The words felt plastic in my hand. I didn't reply. Instead, I placed the phone beside the deed, comparing their weights. Both cold, both tools. I walked through each room of my house, touching the walls, feeling for something still mine. Every frame, every chipped tile, every dent in the hallway was proof of my years here. Proof they couldn't forge. When I reached the bedroom door, I whispered aloud, steady as a confession, "I have to know the truth." The room answered with its stillness, and for the first time in a long while, I felt completely awake. Rita knocked again mid-morning, pretending to borrow sugar she did not need. I handed over a mason jar, and she eyed the kitchen counter carefully. "Saw the mail carrier yesterday. Unusual bundles for your box," she mentioned gently. I smiled and thanked her, then watched her cross the yard slowly. Inside, I opened my postal account and checked informed delivery images. A county tax notice displayed with a different return address printed boldly. The forwarding section said, "Active," with a start date 3 weeks earlier. My stomach cooled, like water left out on concrete. I clicked details and saw a secondary mailing name, Kane Holdings, C/O. It wasn't subtle, just arrogant packaging wrapped in bureaucracy. I drove to the library to print the online receipts quietly. The printer coughed out pages that smelled like warm plastic and ink. I filed each sheet into a new red folder labeled Clues, Calm and Neat. The tax notice appeared again, now paired with a utilities email routed to spam. The account holder name had switched to Authorized Manager, a phrase that rang wrong. I called the utility, stayed polite, and asked for a billing supervisor. She said the contact change appeared from an authenticated session and time-stamped it precisely. I wrote the timestamp in my notebook and drew a small box around it. Real things leave tracks, I reminded myself firmly. The librarian's cart squeaked past, and I pretended to study recipe blogs. On the walk home, the street held ordinary sounds that suddenly bothered me. Someone trimmed a hedge, and the smell of sap felt too sweet. I passed the elementary school fence where Tyler used to trade baseball cards. A memory came clear as if breathed on glass, soft and quick. He had been 8, knobby knees, pockets full of gravel. "I'll always look out for you, Mom," he had said solemnly. He slipped a crushed dandelion into my palm like a soldier's medal. The stem stained my skin green, and I laughed at his ceremony. That promise felt weightless then, yet huge as the sky above us. At home, I tested the locks and opened drawers with steady patience. Ava had organized the hall cabinet last month, that helpful smile pasted on. My emergency binder was moved 2 shelves down, almost invisible. Inside, a photocopy of my driver's license sat misaligned. That page had never left the binder, not once in years. I studied the edges and noticed a faint black line like a shadow. Someone had scanned the page on a flatbed, then returned it carelessly. The metaphor fit too well. A shadow announces a hand even. When hidden, I placed that copy into the red folder and added a sticky note. Late afternoon light pulled long stripes across the dining room. I laid out everything and checked for patterns quietly. 2 clues tied to mail, 1 to utilities, 1 to identification. Each change was modest alone and almost boring on purpose. Together they formed a shy chorus pretending to be noise. I called Tyler and let it ring until voicemail caught it. "Hey, sweetheart, quick question about a bill," I said evenly. Then I hung up and wrote down the time and my exact words carefully. Evening crept in, and the house answered with familiar clicks and hums. I cooked rice and eggs, simple food that needed nothing extra. The fork tapped the plate like a small metronome for my thoughts. I checked the porch camera and replayed yesterday's deliveries twice. Ava stood at the mailbox in one clip, head angled like she listened. Her hand moved inside the box longer than necessary, deliberate and slow. She closed the lid, then glanced toward the camera without blinking. I paused the frame and felt the quiet's weight settle over everything. The next morning, the world seemed too ordinary for what I knew. The garbage truck rumbled past, the radio in the driver's cab spilling laughter. I made coffee, let it go cold, then poured it down the sink. My reflection in the window looked steady, but my chest felt packed with gravel. I opened the county recorder's portal again, counting how many times my property appeared in search. The system listed 1 deed transfer, 1 lien release, 1 active note. The first two I knew, the third I did not. I copied the document number, heart pounding in a slow drumbeat. Clicking opened a PDF with lines of text that felt foreign yet familiar, loan documents bearing Tyler's digital signature. A small section read, "Authorized Representative, Ava Morton." My name appeared below in parentheses, typed "not written." It wasn't even a forgery worth effort, just inserted like a placeholder. The form said the notary verified signatures in person. The date matched the week I was hospitalized for pneumonia. That alignment hit me like a door slammed in the dark. Someone had used my absence as their permission. I printed every page and highlighted the inconsistencies until the yellow stripes blurred. At noon, I called the title office, asked calmly for hypothetical guidance, and the clerk sighed before explaining how signatures could be contested. She mentioned one phrase I underlined 3 times: "You'll need a certified copy of the deed index to begin." After hanging up, I sat by the kitchen phone cradle, staring at the coiled cord as if it still held voices. I picked up the receiver again, dialed Gordon Price, my late husband's old colleague. He'd retired years ago but still answered like he never left the office. "Marjorie Kane," he said warmly. "You sound like trouble." I almost laughed. I told him I needed help understanding an ownership anomaly. His tone shifted from friendly to precise. "Bring me the paperwork. No copies. Originals," he instructed. I packed everything into the red folder, slipped it inside a plain grocery bag, and headed out. Gordon's small office above the hardware store smelled of dust and peppermint oil. He looked older but sharper somehow, the kind of man who still believed in paper over pixels. He spread my documents across the desk like cards from a grim deck. "These filings don't follow sequence," he muttered, tapping his pen. Someone jumped the queue at submission, likely used insider access. His glasses slid down his nose as he peered at the stamped numbers. "You've got a live refinance under an entity, but the notary's ID number belongs to a bank employee, not a freelancer." "Sloppy." He leaned back. "Do you want me to pull recorder logs?" I nodded, afraid my voice might crack if I spoke. When I left, the air outside carried the smell of oil and sunlight. I felt both lighter and heavier, as if truth added weight while removing confusion. At home, I closed all the curtains, lined up the documents again, and stuck a note on top: "Find the gap." My pen pressed hard enough to dent the table. I checked my voicemail Tyler again, cheerful, casual, asking if I'd seen a delivery at the door. I replayed the message twice, searching for a tremor in his tone. There was none. Just confidence, the kind that comes from thinking you're ahead. I whispered to the empty room, "You won't be for long." Gordon called early the next morning before I'd even dressed. His voice carried the rhythm of someone reading fine print out loud. "Marjorie, I've checked the county's log. The filing agent's access code belongs to a third-party firm name of Ridgeway Settlement Services." He paused, waiting for my reaction. I said the name softly, like tasting poison. "They handled my refinance," Gordon added. 15 years back, clean then. But this looks off." He told me to come by again, but I insisted he email only what was safe to share. I opened my laptop, heart pounding, and saw his message appear with attachments, each a thread waiting to be pulled. One document was a notary journal excerpt, signed by C. Dewitt. I searched the state registry, no such license existed. That was when the full picture started to take shape, and it chilled me. I walked to the post office and mailed certified copies of my original deed to myself, sealed and time-stamped for proof. It was a small move, defensive, but necessary. The clerk gave me a sympathetic smile without asking questions. Maybe she'd seen similar storms. When I returned home, I found Ava's car parked crooked near the curb, trunk half open. She stood by the door, pretending to scroll through her phone. "Hi, Mrs. Kane," she said, voice bright, too smooth. I asked if she needed something, and she smiled. "Just dropping off some things. For Tyler. Old paperwork." Her hand rested on a padded envelope that looked too thick for simple mail. I nodded, watching her walk back to the car with the stiff grace of someone rehearsed. Inside, I waited until her car disappeared before checking the front step. A smaller envelope lay half hidden behind the planter, my name handwritten but unsigned. Inside were photocopies of new loan terms and a sticky note that read, "Please don't make this harder." I sat on the porch, the wind stirring dry leaves across the concrete. The audacity of it turned my fear into something sharper, more functional. I photographed every page, then locked the originals in my desk drawer. By dusk, I called Gordon again. "I've got partial proof," I told him. "And I think Ava's in deeper than Tyler realizes." He was quiet a long moment before answering. "Then it's time we make this official," he said. We met 2 days later at his office. He handed me a checklist: deed certification, notary verification request, and a letter to the State Banking Commission. "You file these in sequence," he instructed. "Start with the affidavit of ownership. Make them chase your paperwork for once." I followed his pen as he marked each signature line. "Once this begins," he warned, "it can't be quiet anymore." I said I understood, though inside I felt both terrified and alive. Before leaving, I noticed a framed quote on his shelf: "Paper doesn't lie, people do." It stuck with me all the way home. That evening, Tyler called again. His voice was gentle, rehearsed. "Mom, you're making things complicated," he said. I kept my words light. "I'm just sorting some files, dear. Nothing complicated about facts." He sighed, probably thinking he'd handled me. But I smiled after hanging up, knowing each printed page now worked against him. When I looked out the window, the porch light reflected faintly off the mailbox, steady, unblinking, like a witness. The rain started that night, light at first, then steady enough to drown thoughts. I spread Gordon's checklist across the dining table, each page anchored with a mug or salt shaker. The lamp cast a yellow cone of order amid the storm. I printed copies of every document, marked dates, and slid them into labeled envelopes. Recorder, Banking Commission, Notary Office. The air smelled of ink and rain, a scent that mixed oddly with the calm that had settled in me. I wasn't shaking anymore. I had evidence now, and evidence had its own gravity. It didn't care about love or family. It only obeyed sequence and truth. I sealed each envelope with deliberate slowness, pressing my thumb along the edge as if closing a wound. The next morning, I delivered them in order. The county office smelled of toner and nervous patience. The clerk barely looked up as she stamped the first envelope. "Filed," she murmured, her voice the sound of routine justice. At the notary licensing board, a young woman checked records, her brow furrowing. "This ID doesn't exist," she said quietly. "Do you want to submit a fraud complaint?" I nodded, though the words felt both too big and too late. At the bank, I dropped off my letter of dispute at the compliance desk, where a middle-aged man promised a review within 10 business days. His tie was crooked, his empathy mechanical, but it didn't matter. Each delivery was a nail, and by noon, the coffin of their scheme had shape. When I returned home, my answering machine blinked red, 3 new messages. The first was Tyler, calm but strained. "Mom, let's not make this a war, okay?" The second was Ava, polite and detached. "I think you're misunderstanding how ownership transfers work." The third was silence, then a click, followed by breathing. I deleted them one by one, except the last. That one I saved. You can learn a lot from silence if you play it twice. I wrote down the timestamp and logged it with the others. Facts. He didn't need forgiveness, only filing. That evening, Gordon called again. "Got something," he said, his tone clipped but triumphant. "Recorder audit shows a forged submission from a remote terminal. Someone used a bank staff login after hours. It ties back to Ridgeway." I leaned against the counter, the receiver warm against my ear. "So they forged the notary and used a closed office to upload the deed," I said slowly. "Exactly," he replied. "The timestamp matches your hospital stay." We stayed quiet for a moment, letting that fact breathe. Then he said softly, "You ready to push this further?" I stared at the kitchen wall where Tyler's childhood drawings once hung, faded crayon ghosts. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." After we hung up, I opened a new notebook. On the first page, I wrote, Phase 2, Exposure. I underlined it once hard. Then I poured myself a small glass of wine and stood by the window. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining. Across the yard, Rita's light flicked on. She always stayed up late reading mysteries. I smiled faintly at the thought that my life had turned into one. But this story wouldn't end in mystery, it would end in clarity, and I would be the one writing the final chapter. The letter from the bank arrived with the morning's junk mail bundle. The envelope felt heavier than paper, like it carried a new gravity. I slit it open with the butter knife, the blade catching light. A compliance officer had completed initial review, bureaucratic words masking a bruise. The letter confirmed a limited power of attorney executed during my pneumonia stay. My name appeared, typed cleanly, authorizing management of real property, including refinance and encumbrance. The signature line bore a curling scrawl that wanted to be mine. The notary block listed a date I spent coughing under fluorescent lights. A seal impression looked clean, but the notary ID already lived on my pression. Complaint form. I laid the letter flat and felt the room tilt slightly. Gordon called as I stared at the paper like it might speak. "They sent you the same garbage," he said without preamble. "Read me the notary's expiry date." I read it slowly, and he exhaled through his teeth. "Expired last year," he said, voice flattening with certainty. "That block is backdated, and the seal's pattern is outdated." I touched the letter's edge again, like confirming it could still cut. He told me to check the recorder's portal while he stayed on speaker. I typed the parcel number with a precision I barely recognized. A new document appeared, Notice of Assignment of Deed of Trust. The assignee was a private investor fund I'd never heard aloud before. I printed the assignment and sat on the floor with the pages. The carpet pressed lines into my knees, grounding me to something stubborn. The assignment linked to a cash-out refinance closed 2 months prior. Funds dispersed to Kane Holdings account within 48 hours, clean and fast. The schedule of disbursements listed authorized agent A. Morton, clinical as a cold spoon. I could almost hear the escrow office printer spitting money into digital veins. The payoff of my old note stood correct, which made the fraud tidier. They had swapped my equity for debt and called it housekeeping. I marked every amount with a pencil until the page looked caged. At noon, I drove to the bank branch where Tyler opened his first account. The lobby smelled like carpet cleaner and lemon, bright and false. I asked for the branch manager, keeping my voice small and polite. She led me to a glass cubicle that trapped our reflections. "We can't disclose account details," she began, soft but trained. I placed my notarized identity affidavit on the table, edges squared. "I'm not asking for balances," I said, steady as a level. "I need to confirm whether documents were signed here, in person." She checked an internal log, eyes flicking quick as sparrows. "The signing was logged remotely," she said finally, blinking once like a tell. Later, in Gordon's office, we spread the new prints beside old ones. He held a magnifier over the notary seal like a jeweler weighing stones. "Different ring of dots," he murmured, satisfied. "Wrong generation of seal, wrong expiry, wrong everything." He pointed to a file number that skipped a sequence by 3. "Backdoor submission," he said, certainty replacing doubt's oxygen. He dialed the lender's fraud hotline on speaker, letting the recording announce the call. "We have evidence of fabricated notarization tied to your collateral," he stated. The agent asked for timestamps, and Gordon read them like scripture. I felt the room settle as the agent promised to escalate. That evening, I sat on the porch steps with the assignment copy. The streetlights hummed, and moths battered themselves against warm halos. Rita strolled over with her careful steps and folded hands. "You look like you found the engine, not just the smoke," she said. I nodded, unable to trust my voice with the whole truth. "They used my sickness as a line item," I finally managed. She winced, then placed a wrapped lemon bar on my step. "Keep your sugar up," she said, soft as a secret. When she left, the porch felt like a witness stand. The house breathed behind me, steady, patient, and waiting. The next blow came quietly, no phone call, no letter, just a ping from the recorder's website. Document 0419 verified and viewable. I clicked before I could breathe. The screen opened to a scanned image of the power of attorney, this time in higher resolution. The signature wasn't only forged, it was layered, pixelated where ink should have pooled. I zoomed in until the letters broke into blocks, mechanical and cold. It was like seeing my own ghost written by a printer. The reality hit harder than any insult could. Someone had taken my name and made it perform for them. I stared until my eyes watered, then printed a copy and laid it on the counter, proof that trust could be photocopied too. That night, I didn't cook. I sat by the kitchen window as headlights passed, casting bars of light across the wallpaper. Tyler texted again, short, cautious messages pretending normalcy. "Hope you're resting, Mom." Then another, "Ava's worried you're stressed." I read them like coded warnings, each one polite enough to hide guilt. I typed, "I'm fine," but didn't send it. Instead, I scrolled through his social media, finding a tagged photo at a wine bar. Tyler smiling beside Ava, both holding a document folder. The caption read, "Almost done with the future." My throat closed. I turned off the phone. The image still burned into memory. The next morning, I met Gordon at the coffee shop across from the courthouse. He had already printed everything. "They filed a lien satisfaction under your name yesterday," he said. "Means they're trying to look legitimate. If they cover tracks fast enough, reversal gets harder." I felt the air thin. "So what happens now?" He sipped his coffee, eyes narrowing. "Now we let them believe they've won. You gather, you wait, you let the truth ripen." His calm steadied me more than caffeine ever could. I realized then that revenge wasn't rage, it was timing. When I got home, the mailbox overflowed with flyers and one thick envelope from Ridgeway Settlement Services. Inside were copies of loan disbursements and a thank you letter for choosing our services again. My hands shook, but not from fear. The line "again" told me they thought I'd done this before. That arrogance would undo them. I spread the documents across the table beside the forged notary seal, like puzzle pieces starting to show an image. Outside, the wind carried faint laughter from across the street, Ava's voice, high and rehearsed, calling to Rita about a move-in date. She was confident enough to plan her victory on my lawn. I watched through the curtain as Tyler joined her, hand resting on her back. They looked like a couple posing for a real estate ad. My heart hurt, but the pain felt purposeful now, a clean burn sharpening my resolve. I whispered to the quiet room, "You signed away more than paper, son." The clock ticked, unbothered. Upstairs, I opened the cedar chest and pulled out the small tin box with my husband's old fountain pen. It still worked. I wrote one sentence on a clean sheet of paper. "They stole my name, so I'll take theirs back." I folded it neatly and placed it atop the red folder. For the first time, I felt a strange calm, like the moment before a verdict you already know. I woke early and walked the garden before decisions hardened into plans. The roses needed pruning, their thorns felt honest beneath my gloves. I trimmed each stem with slow care, the snip a tiny ritual of reclaiming. Morning light slanted across the folder on my kitchen table, papers arranged like a patient army. I brewed tea, then sat, aligning documents by date and origin until their patterns showed. Each page became a map, timestamps, IP logs, notary journals, and bank page headers. I labeled everything in blue ink the way clerks label evidence in films. Gordon called mid-morning to confirm a subpoena template he could file pro bono. "We'll escalate, we'll make them prove every step in public," he said, voice rough with readiness. I told him to wait one more day. Timing, he agreed, was everything. I sent anonymous certified letters to the county recorder and Ridgeway's fraud desk, careful not to reveal my moves. The envelope smelled of ink and small revenge as they left my hands. Rita helped by agreeing to keep an eye on Tyler's comings and goings, feigning errands and flower runs. She reported back with quiet observations. Ava leaving at odd hours, a delivery van visiting twice in Merrick area. The night. That confirmation felt less like gossip and more like corroboration. I printed screen captures of Ava at the mailbox and embedded the files in a chronology. Paper has a way of turning suspicion into an accusation everyone has to address. I called a local journalist I barely knew, one who wrote about small civic frauds, and left a neutral voicemail hinting at a pattern. "Not yet," I told him indirectly, "unless the bank lets this slide." Afternoon found me in the attic with a shoebox of relics, Tyler's report cards, my husband's old tax returns, and a faded closing statement from our original mortgage. I spread the closing costs beside the new assignment and watched the numbers talk. Equity that once paid for college and curtains had vanished into an LLC's account. I photocopied the old signatures, comparing them beneath a lamp like fingerprints. The lamp's light caught the ink's subtle flaws. The forged loops had hesitation holes. I cataloged each discrepancy into a spreadsheet Gordon had taught me to love, rows and cells that made chaos look rational. Then I sat back and breathed, feeling the air rearrange around the plan. That evening I cooked a simple stew, listening to Gordon outline a legal chokehold. A temporary restraining notice filed with the court and served on the title company. It would freeze transfers until a hearing forced everyone to explain themselves. "They'll have to testify under oath," he said. "Paperwork, signatures, IP logs will force them through truth sieve." I asked about collateral damage, about family breaking, and he answered without flinching. "Some fences break, Marjorie. You build better on their rubble." I let the sentence settle. His steadiness made my anger useful rather than blinding. Night brought a symbolic calm. I wrote a letter to Tyler without intending to send it. It read like a map of facts, not a plea for forgiveness. I listed dates, names, and the one line that mattered most: you signed what you did, and someone paid for it. The letter sat folded on the table while I dialed the lender's fraud hotline myself, speaking in measured facts rather than accusations. Their recorded voice promised a review and gave a reference number I wrote down immediately. I placed that number beside the red folder and slid a weight onto the papers to keep them quiet, to keep the plan sealed until it was time. Before bed, I walked the house, touching frames and door jambs, as if naming each thing could anchor ownership anew. The phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Mom, wanna talk?" I watched the blue bubble glow, considered the moment, and did not reply. My silence was part of the strategy now, deliberate and cold. Standing by the window, I watched the street, the porch light pooling gold on the pavement. I felt strangely calm, as if the hard work of naming truth had already begun to mend what was taken. The trap began quietly, like all deliberate storms. I visited the county recorder's office again, this time not to file but to observe. The clerk on duty was new, still learning the rhythm of the scanner, and I watched as she aligned stacks of deeds under glass. When she stepped away, I asked simple questions about the upload queue, innocent, curious, the way older women are expected to be. She explained that filings older than 30 days auto-archive unless flagged for review. I smiled, thanked her, and left knowing exactly what to do next. At home, I drafted a request for verification hold using their own format, citing procedural errors. The form went out by courier before sunset, pausing the very documents Ava believed were buried. Meanwhile, Gordon moved on his side of the board. He filed an inquiry under his name. An attorney still held weight even in retirement. His letter demanded that Ridgeway's compliance officer preserve all communication logs involving Kane Holdings. "They'll scramble," he said over the phone, "because they don't know where the leak starts." I pictured that panic traveling from cubicle to cubicle, emails flagged urgent, phones buzzing like trapped flies. Tyler and Ava wouldn't know the cause, only the symptoms. Their escrow sale would stall quietly while everyone tried to trace a phantom procedural error. Revenge didn't need noise. It thrived on silence and paperwork. For the next 2 days, I rehearsed my calm. I went to the market, greeted neighbors, baked lemon bread I didn't eat. Every gesture of normalcy served as camouflage. The plan's rhythm became part of daily life document: deliver, wait. Rita visited with gossip about Ava's new furniture order. "Looks like she's preparing for a move," she said, half worried, half intrigued. I smiled politely and handed her half the loaf, careful not to reveal anything yet. Inside, though, I could feel the balance shifting back toward me. Each form, each sealed envelope was another inch of ground reclaimed. Then came the lender's callback. A woman named Karen from the fraud unit spoke carefully, words weighed like coins. "Mrs. Kane, our review confirms discrepancies in notarization and authorization. The loan has been placed under temporary freeze pending further investigation." My heart stayed steady this time. I asked if that meant no transfers could proceed. She confirmed, tone professional but kind. When I hung up, I looked around my kitchen, the table, the curtains, the quiet clock, and whispered, "It's mine again." The room didn't answer, but the air felt lighter. I poured tea and let the warmth fill my hands. Revenge was no longer a plan. It was a process, signed and dated. Gordon suggested one final move: a notarized affidavit from me stating my absence during the forged signing period. He drafted it overnight and had me sign it before a witness the next morning. "Once recorded, no buyer will touch that house," he explained. "Fraud tags follow, property like shadows." We laughed softly at the poetry of it. By midday, the affidavit sat with the county recorder under urgent review. The same clerk stamped it with bright red ink, "Priority Potential Fraud," before sliding it into the queue. I walked out feeling taller, as though every step added weight to my presence again. That evening, Tyler showed up unannounced. His car door slammed, heavy with nerves. "Mom," he began, voice tired. "We need to talk about the house." I let him inside, offered no tea. His eyes darted toward the table where my folders lay stacked like quiet witnesses. "The bank's freezing things," he said quickly, frustration edging into panic. "You're ruining everything." I met his gaze, calm as glass. "No, Tyler," I said, steady and slow. "I'm correcting it." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came, only the small sound of a man realizing he'd misjudged his mother's limits. I watched him leave, shoulders stiff, silence swallowing his excuses. The morning I set the trap, the air felt thin and workable. I arranged the folders by sequence and placed the fountain pen above them. My phone sat face down, "Do not disturb" on, timers scheduled for each deadline. Gordon and I spoke on speakerphone, both of us confirming times like surgeons. "Escrow appointment at 11:30, he said, reading the calendar invite aloud. I repeated the confirmation number and wrote it twice in my notebook margin. The recorder's portal showed my affidavit as "in review" flagged, a red banner warming my resolve. I checked the certified mail tracking. Every envelope showed "delivered," signature captured. The kettle clicked off and I didn't drink. My hands needed to stay steady. Calm isn't kindness, I told myself. Today, calm is a loaded tool. At 10:15, the bank's fraud unit called to verify presence for a case conference. I set the phone on the counter with speaker engaged, then read them my reference number. Karen's voice came steady, professional, exactly what I needed. "Will be available at 11:45, she said, "to verify recorded discrepancies if required." I confirmed, repeated the time, and placed a sticky note on the handset. Then I emailed the journalist a single sentence. "If a sale collapses today due to forged notarization, would you observe?" He replied with a quiet, "I'll be nearby," and no more. I forwarded him nothing. Rumor and timing would do the lift. The porch camera light blinked green, and I adjusted its angle by an inch, practical as a level. I parked one block from the escrow office to avoid the front cameras. The lot smelled like hot tar, and a leaf blower whined somewhere without end. I carried only the red folder and my identification, no purse to fumble with. Inside, a receptionist in a navy blazer offered a pen I did not take. "Kane signing," I said, voice even and small enough to be underestimated. She led me to a glassed conference room where documents waited in a tidy stack. Tyler and Ava arrived 2 minutes later, breathless and glossy with expectation. "Mom," he began, smile thin, "we just need one more signature." I looked at the pages and saw the lines meant to swallow me. "Before we begin," I said, "I'd like the notary's ID number read into the room." The escrow officer blinked, then produced her commission card without hesitation. Her number matched the registry cleanly. She was not the problem. I placed my affidavit on the table with its county receipt attached like a shield. "This is recorded or recording," I said, flagging fraud under penalty of perjury. Tyler's face went through 3 expressions before landing on practiced patience. Ava's jaw moved like she chewed a seed that would not break. The officer asked me gently to explain, and I did in short, accurate pieces. Remote login, expired notary, backdated seal, hospital, records for my absence, I recited. Her pen stopped moving after the second item and did not start again. I dialed Karen and tapped speaker. The room filled with office air from another building. "Fraud unit," she answered, crisp as a stapler closing. I gave her the case number and the escrow appointment number together. She confirmed the freeze and asked to speak with the officer directly. The handoff happened cleanly, 2 professionals recognizing shape before story. Words like "hold harmless," "collateral integrity," and "suspicious instrument" passed between them. Tyler shifted in his chair, trying for a relaxed slouch that didn't fit anymore. Ava stared at the door like she could will it into an exit. I read their silence like print. It said the future had changed rooms. The officer hung up and folded her hands carefully. "We can't proceed with signing today," she announced, voice low, definitive. Tyler began a sentence and abandoned it halfway. Ava reached for the paper stack, then let her hands fall, finally still. Your affidavit requires response, the officer continued, and the lender is escalating. I said nothing and watched the clock tick toward 11:45 as if that mattered. Gordon walked in then, perfectly on time, his old briefcase clicking shut behind him. He introduced himself and laid a single-page notice on the table. "Notice of intent to seek restraining order," he said, not unkindly. Ava made a noise like a laugh and a cough trying to live together. "Marjorie, please," Tyler whispered, voice cracking at the edges now. I looked at my son and remembered the dandelion ceremony by the school fence. "The house is not your solution," I answered, steady, almost gentle. He glanced at Ava, then at the officer, searching for permission inside strangers' eyes. None arrived. Gordon asked politely for copies of the unsigned documents for his records. The officer handed them over without objection, procedure now running on rails. I placed the pages into the red folder. Spine straight, corners squared, breath even. Evidence has posture when you let it stand. We left the building into heat that felt newly owned. Outside, the journalist across the street pretended to study his phone. He took no photos, but his presence felt like a record anyway. I nodded once, and he nodded back, a silent acknowledgement of timing. Tyler and Ava emerged moments later, faces tight, words swallowed. Ava spoke first, low and sharp. "You overplayed this," and walked toward the lot without turning. Tyler stayed, hands open, as if asking a stubborn door to unlock. "Mom," he tried again, but the word sounded smaller than it used to. I touched his sleeve once, not a comfort, just contact. "We will answer to paper now," I said, and started home. The next morning the silence felt deliberate, as if the world itself held its breath. I woke before dawn, reviewed my notes, and checked the recorder portal again. My affidavit was now fully indexed, marked with the case number that made it legally visible to anyone searching the property. It was real, public, irreversible. The news spread faster than I imagined. By 9, Gordon texted. "Escrow flagged, Ridgeway notified. Fraud unit circling." I sat at the kitchen table and watched sunlight crawl across the red folder like a slow match. Every careful page, every timestamp, now had weight outside my house. I no longer needed to speak loudly, the system would do it for me. At 10:30, Rita called, her voice low but eager. "Marge, something's happening," she said. "Ava's out front on the phone, pacing like a storm." I stepped to the window and saw her there, her perfect hair undone, her posture shrinking by the minute. She gestured wildly, the phone pressed so tight her knuckles whitened. Moments later, Tyler's car appeared, tires screeching slightly on the curb. He climbed out fast, no jacket, face flushed. They argued in clipped fragments I could almost lip-read. "You said it was clear." They froze it. "Your name, why?" His hands moved like punctuation marks, sharp and helpless. It should have broken me, but all I felt was a clean, focused stillness. Justice doesn't arrive with fanfare. It settles like dust after collapse. I turned on the news channel, muted, just to see the crawl at the bottom of the screen. It hadn't taken long, the journalist had done his part. A segment titled, "County Investigates Title Forgery Scheme," scrolled by, my neighborhood's street name blurred but recognizable. I didn't smile. I exhaled. The reporter had kept his promise. No names yet, just pattern and process. Still, it was enough to shake everyone who recognized the shape of the story. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler, short, desperate. "Please stop. We can fix this together." I didn't reply. I knew what together meant. It always meant me cleaning what he broke. Not anymore. By noon, the bank called again. Voice formal, tone newly cautious. "Mrs. Kane, we've suspended the disbursement account linked to the fraudulent refinance. We'll require your cooperation for restitution proceedings." Restitution. The word had the clean ring of math. I agreed, wrote down every detail, and thanked them politely. After hanging up, I let the quiet return. I poured another cup of tea, stirred sugar slowly, and felt the tremor finally leave my hand. It had taken weeks, but control was back, quiet and absolute. When the knock came, I expected it. Tyler stood there, pale, sweating, a man losing both money and story. "Mom, please, they're investigating Ava," he began, eyes wide like a boy again. "She didn't mean." He stopped himself, realizing how thin that sounded. I stepped aside and let him in, motioning toward the kitchen. The The same table that once held his homework now held evidence folders. "You used my illness," I said, my voice neither angry nor soft. "You thought grief makes people slow. You forgot that time doesn't dull a mother's memory. It sharpens it." His eyes glistened, and he sank into a chair. "She said we'd pay it back," he muttered. "She said it was temporary." Temporary. The word clanged against the walls. I placed the original deed between us, paper yellowed but defiant. "This," I said, tapping it once, "was never temporary." He looked down, shoulders folding inward, the shape of guilt settling heavy. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The clock ticked in steady sympathy. I reached for a glass of water, slid it toward him. "The investigators will ask you questions," I said. "Answer them truthfully. Every lie adds another rope around your neck." He nodded slowly, voice breaking. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I believed that, but believing didn't erase damage. Love can understand without forgiving." When he left, Ava's car wasn't waiting. The driveway looked cleaner than it had in weeks. I watched him walk down the street alone, shoulders hunched, a boy without armor. The camera light blinked above the porch, recording everything as usual. Later that evening, Gordon called, satisfaction beneath his steady tone. "Bank froze the account officially," he said. "Escrow terminated. The fund will file its own civil claim. You're insulated now." I thanked him, voice quiet, hands folded around the phone. "It's over," he said, but I knew endings come in layers. Some take longer to settle. I stepped outside after dark, barefoot on the cool concrete. The street lay silent except for a single owl calling from the elm. The air smelled faintly of rain again, the same kind that had begun this whole unraveling. I looked up at the porch light, steady and faithful, and whispered, "We're done." The words weren't for Tyler or Ava or Gordon, they were for the house itself, for the years that survived inside its walls. I closed the door, locked it once, and turned off the light. Inside the dark, peace finally sounded like silence that belonged to me. By morning, the street hummed with curiosity wearing polite masks and sunglasses. The journalist's piece ran online, careful on names, loud on process details. Neighbors pretended to weed while positioning themselves for better views of our door. Rita visited twice, genuinely concerned, carrying a pie like a peace treaty. "People will talk regardless," she warned, voice soft as folded linen. I nodded, feeling gossip scratch past like dry leaves against siding. At noon, a process server arrived. Neat tie, clipboard balanced like a scale. He asked for Ava, then served Tyler instead. Manila envelope stamped with the court's crest. The case number sat printed in the corner like a barcode. He left without drama, the envelope heavier than anything words could carry. By afternoon, the family chat lit up with opinions packaged as blessings. Cousin Jolene posted a long message about filial respect and modern complexities. Then she attached screenshots of county pages, proof no sermon could soften. My sister called next, voice trembling with loyalty stretched thin and ragged. "Tell me you're safe, Marjorie," she pleaded, breath hitching once. I told her I was safe and steady, and that truth was walking. She cried softly, then said she believed me, and that belief warmed my ribs. The phone buzzed with another notification, an aunt asking if church could mediate. I typed slowly that we needed courts, not casseroles, and hit send carefully. Screens went quiet afterward, like everyone collectively swallowed their bravery. Late afternoon brought Tyler to the porch again, hollow-eyed and winded. He stood where the porch camera could see, hands open, nothing hidden. "They're saying I knew everything," he started, voice scratched thin. "I knew some. Not all," he added, mouth tightening around pieces. The honesty came, like a tired bird, landing because it needed rest. I opened the door halfway, enough for air and hearing. "Truth isn't a mattress," I said, words even and firm. "You don't get softer sleep by sharing part of it." He flinched, then nodded, then stared at the porch boards as if answers grew there. He left with shoulders set differently, the shape of consequence settling into bone. That evening, the HOA president called, rehearsed politeness lining every sentence. She suggested a community dialogue to manage concerns about neighborhood reputation. I nearly laughed but kept my mouth straight and voice calm. "The reputation improves when fraud ends," I answered, unblinking. She mentioned property values like they were living relatives needing comfort. I heard Ava's name in the background, someone whispering just out of reach. I declined the meeting and suggested they read public filings instead. She thanked me in that brittle way of people who prefer cushions to chairs. After hanging up, I wrote the time and subject in my ledger. Order comforted me now more than any social ease ever could. At dusk, Rita walked with me to the curb, her arm looped through mine. She didn't offer advice. She offered presence, which mattered more. The street smelled of cut grass and distant charcoal, normal colliding with history. A car slowed, then moved on, curiosity breaking without the courage to park. "They'll try to make this your shame," Rita said, voice low. "But shame belongs to whoever wanted your name without your work." I squeezed her hand once, grateful for the precision of her kindness. Across the street, a porch light flicked twice, a small signal from watching eyes. The neighborhood wasn't a jury, but it enjoyed the trial's theater anyway. I turned inward, deciding which rooms still needed my peace restored. The next day, Gordon arranged a meeting with the bank's counsel downtown. We sat in a small conference room that smelled like dry carpet and toner. The counsel's questions came clipped, clean, and almost apologetic. He wanted timelines, call logs, discharge notices, and copies of my hospital records. I answered plainly, without color, just dates that refused to bend. "Restitution will depend on asset recovery," he explained, eyes still professional. "We'll pursue the settlement firm and whoever controlled the login." Gordon slid across our stacked exhibits like a dealer who liked his deck. "We'll also pursue attorney fees," he added, gentle but surgical. The counsel nodded, made notes, then scheduled depositions with quick, precise clicks. News of the depositions rippled through family faster than any celebration ever had. A cousin posted, then deleted, then posted again, screenshots now highlighted in neon. Tyler texted that he'd attend, that he would answer everything honestly. Ava remained silent, her social accounts suddenly private, photos reshuffled or removed. It wasn't triumph, I felt, but a slow, cooling rightness. Justice, unlike anger, doesn't need to shout to be heard. I stood at the kitchen window and watched morning light polish the sink. The house looked ordinary again, clean lines and old grooves back in place. My phone buzzed once more, a final message from my sister. "Hold steady, we're with you." I slid the phone beside the red folder, breathing evenly until the quiet settled. The days after the public exposure felt like an aftershock that wouldn't stop humming. Everyone pretended life resumed its rhythm, but the tone of greetings had shifted. At the grocery store, people paused half a second longer before saying hello. Some whispered my name like it had turned into a cautionary tale. Rita joked that the whole town now understood the difference between ownership and possession. I laughed because laughter cost less than explanations. The mail brought apologies disguised as formal letters, one from Ridgway, one from the lender, both assuring renewed commitment to integrity. I pinned them to the corkboard like trophies from a war I hadn't wanted. The deposition week arrived wrapped in early fog. Tyler called first, his voice careful, tired. "I'll tell the truth," he promised. I told him that was the least he could do and wished him courage, not comfort. At the courthouse, I waited in a side room with Gordon. Across the hall, lawyers murmured strategy, paper rustling like dry wings. When Tyler entered, he looked smaller in his suit, shoulders drawn inward. His eyes flicked toward me, searching for something, permission, maybe, or forgiveness, but I stayed still. The court reporter adjusted her machine, fingers poised. Questions began, sharp but polite, and each answer tightened the weave around the story. Who initiated contact with Ridgway? Who supplied identification? When was authorization obtained? His answers landed honest, unembellished, enough to make silence thick after every few lines. By midday, Ava's turn came. She arrived flanked by her attorney, expression composed yet cracked at the edges. She denied first, then minimized, then contradicted herself within minutes. Gordon leaned close and whispered, "She's unraveling." I watched her lips tremble as she realized her name was now inked beside fraudulent inducement. It didn't bring joy, only an exhausted relief. Justice isn't cinematic, it's procedural, slow, and smells faintly of toner. When it ended, I walked outside alone. Tyler followed halfway, stopping before the steps. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I nodded, a small acknowledgement that sorrow could exist without restoration. He left before I could see him cry. The local news covered the case again that evening, softer now, humanizing. The anchor said, "A homeowner's vigilance exposed a broader forgery network, and for once, my name was mentioned not as scandal but as citation." Neighbors stopped pretending. Surprise. They started asking for advice about wills, deeds, and signatures. Rita hosted a small gathering just to toast due diligence. We sat under her patio lights, the air cool, the laughter real again. "You've started a trend," she said, passing me lemonade. "Truth as a hobby." I smiled, though the word hobby made it sound gentler than it was. Weeks passed. The house grew quieter in a good way. Paperwork settled into tidy drawers. Gordon's final letter confirmed the bank's restitution offer, full reinstatement of title, damages, and coverage of legal costs. I read it twice, folded it carefully, and filed it under closed matters. Tyler moved to another city, starting over, sending postcards signed only with first initials. Each one short, factual, grateful. I wrote back once, a single line, "Grow honesty before roots, or it won't hold." He never replied, and that silence felt like peace rather than punishment. Autumn found me repainting the porch, the same soft cream my husband once favored. Rita helped, humming tunelessly while I brushed the edges slow and neat. The air smelled of paint and dry leaves, a combination that always meant things were finished. "Feels different now," she said, stepping back to admire the work. I nodded, watching sunlight catch the railing. "It's not just my house anymore," I said. "It's proof." She didn't ask proof of what, and I didn't explain. Some truths don't need witnesses, they just need to exist long enough to breathe. When the last coat dried, we sat in the quiet, two women content to let the world notice or not. Winter came quietly that year, crisp mornings dusted with frost that melted before noon. The house stood steady, lighter somehow, no longer carrying secrets under its roof. I spent mornings at the kitchen table with coffee and a small notebook, writing lists of simple things, groceries, repairs, books to read. Peace didn't arrive like a gift. It crept in like sunlight through a curtain, inch by inch. The red folder still sat on the shelf, but now it was only a record, not a weapon. I didn't open it anymore. Instead, I opened windows. I baked more than I ate, sent loaves to the mail carrier, to Rita, even to the new couple who bought Ava's old condo. The scent of cinnamon replaced the sterile tang of paper and ink that had haunted me for months. The house exhaled again, and so did I. Rita visited one morning with her scarf crooked and cheeks pink from the wind. "Feels strange without all the watchers," she said, looking up and down the calm street. I laughed, realizing she was right. The street gossip had gone quiet, replaced by normal noise. Dogs barking, sprinklers ticking. We sat on the porch with mugs steaming in our hands. "You're different now," she said. I thought about that. "Maybe," I answered, "maybe I just stopped trying to be smaller than the truth." She smiled at that and didn't press further. Friendship at our age didn't need explaining. We sat in silence that wasn't empty, listening to crows arguing somewhere in the distance. A letter from Tyler arrived 2 weeks later, no return address, only familiar handwriting. Inside was a check, not large but meaningful, and a short note, for taxes, this time from my own account. I read it 3 times, tears threatening but never spilling. I placed it in an envelope labeled "Resolved," not for money but for meaning. Forgiveness, I decided, wasn't a declaration, it was a slow untying. I hoped he was learning to live inside truth's edges, the way I had learned to. Some debts don't need collection, they need acknowledgement. When spring returned, I planted roses again, new ones this time, pale yellow like early morning light. I wore gloves but still managed a few pricks, small reminders that beauty demands risk. The soil smelled rich and alive. I thought of my husband, his careful patience, the way he always said the ground. I remember's effort. I hope the house did too. Rita helped stake the young stems, steadying each one as I tied soft twine. "Start over, but don't forget," she murmured. I promised I wouldn't. That evening, I recorded a short message for my niece's online channel. her request after hearing my story spread in circles. I sat by the window, camera balanced on stacked books, and spoke simply. If you ever build a life, put your name on it literally and proudly. Don't sign away trust for comfort, and never let kindness blind you to patterns. I paused, smiling faintly. And if you ever lose something, don't chase revenge, chase clarity. It lasts longer. I ended with a laugh that felt like mine again. If this helped, like, share, and subscribe, I said softly. And remember, love without honesty isn't love at all. It's just a loan waiting to default. The camera light blinked off, leaving the room warm and quiet. I closed the curtains, poured myself tea, and looked at the roses through the glass, young, upright, and full of promise. For the first time in years, I felt certain the deed and the life were both truly mine,